Previously on Sinister Inclinations.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Mother Goose on the Loose, a podcast where we watch children's fairy tales and dissect them for hidden clues about the deep state and the military-industrial complex. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, this is a new episode of Sinister Inclinations, the horror show. Do you notice how I pronounced horror quite distinctly? Otherwise, people will think we are a porn film. And we wouldn't want that. To my right is Mr. Sherwood. Terry?
Yes.
My co-host. How are you this evening?
I'm wonderful, Jim. Thank you for having me on this fourth installment of our show. And we have a wonderful guest this evening.
Hi.
Horror author Melanie McCurdie has joined us this evening.
Nice to see you.
To discuss her work. So let's get right down to the nitty-gritty here.
All right.
How long have you been writing?
Oh, since high school at least, but I took about a 20-year sabbatical. Life took over, and I got back into it about 5 years ago.
Okay, and why horror?
Why not?
I hope you're not going to answer every question tonight that way.
Wow, that's a block right there.
You know, there's lots of people out there that write romance, and they write dystopian and all of that sort of stuff. Horror's fun. It's just a lot of fun. You get to kill people. You don't have to go to jail. You know, you can...
Some people are like that in the audience.
Yeah, I can probably name a few. You know who you are.
Yeah, you know who you are.
Uh-huh, you do. There's not many women out there that write horror, so that's a big draw for me. Because, you know, they think you can't. You're a woman, you shouldn't write that stuff.
Are there any female horror authors that you admire? Or?
Not really off the top of my head, to be honest.
I used to enjoy Poppy Bright for a while.
Yeah,
Poppy Z or Z Bright, however.
I got out of reading a lot of the female horror because, frankly, I got bored. You know, as women, I think we have sort of a mental block on how far you can go. There's no limit. Write extreme horror. It's a lot of fun. My new book it's a lot of dystopian. It's a new genre for me, but also there's a lot of blood and guts and gore, and it was so much fun. I laughed through writing most of it. I really enjoyed it.
Are there any puppets at all?
Not in this one.
I find puppets scary as fuck.
Yeah, no, the next one I have something in mind for that, but no, this one just has a bunch of monkeys.
Would you feel that you're more, I guess, easier in doing a short story as opposed to a book? Do you prefer the short story form, or novel or novella? If you have a preference.
I actually enjoy writing novellas because I know myself I don't have a big attention span. I really just don't. So for me, the shorter books are the way to go because I can read them on a plane. I can read them sitting
on
in
a
the
train.
doctor's
You
office.
can read them here and there. You can
I
read
can
them
read
anywhere.
them anywhere. And it's just simpler that way. And it's, I think, an untapped niche as well. There's, you know, everybody writes novels, but there's not any of the dime store, I guess, novellas that are out there anymore. And it's really an untapped market. And that's where I'm looking at right now.
One of the things, just when you mentioned that, there is sort of a niche called shotgun fiction, and where it's actually designed for people with low attention spans, and it's 1 page or 2 page stories in book form. There's usually about 75 of them, and they can sit and read them on trains.
And I've read a few of them, you know, picked them up now and then, and I have a lot of the indie ones that some of my writer friends are involved in, and they're very enjoyable for me. Because, you know, usually with kids or, you know, traveling for doctor's offices or whatever, I don't have the time to sit down and read. When I sit down to read, I want to read the whole thing. And I can't always do that. So this is a much easier way to go.
Well, I'm going to shamelessly plug you here right now when you're talking about short stories and novellas.
And that one too.
Yes, and these are available where, Melanie?
On Amazon.
.ca if you're in Canada.
And .com if you're not.
Should we go through the whole list?
No.
Amazon.de and Deutschland
No. They can figure that out. They're smart out there.
JP.
Yes. They're smart, often smarter than what we are
Yeah,
in here.
yeah. I'm not going to argue with that.
One other question for me is, do you have to get yourself in sort of a writer's mood to work?
If I'm killing people, it really helps if I'm angry. It really, honestly, it does. It just seems to flow better if I'm really irritated or pissed off about something. There's just something about that frame of mind that helps you to get to where you need to go.
Okay. Do you ever, when you're writing, do you draw from personal experience?
Always. There's always some sort of personal experience, whether it's, small or big, involved in it.
So you write what you know?
Usually.
Or know what you write?
Usually. And I do a lot of research for Lunatic Posse. I spent about 6 months researching different aspects, and because there is some virus stuff involved, so I, for me, needed to know what was involved in order to make it a little more real.
So you got delved into artificial immunity and...
Yeah, I touched on it. There's a lot of information out there, so it's really hard to choose what direction to go in. So it was sort of a broad scope, but it gave me what I needed to be able to do it. And I just touch on it. It's not in depth, but enough that it'll give the reader an idea of what we're looking at.
Right.
One of the things I noticed too about reading some of your material off your website, and we can talk about that as well, is a lot of it is written in the I point of view.
It easier to write first person. If I can put myself into that situation, and my readers have said that they find it easier to put themselves into it too. The third person is really difficult for me to work in. I have done, but I always find it easier to put myself into whatever situation is up. If I'm burying somebody in the sand or whatever, it's easier if I'm there, because then I'm seeing everything around me and the experiences and everything that goes with it.
I think we discussed that before, how difficult that is, though, when we try to adapt it into a screenplay.
Yes.
It presents certain challenges
Absolutely.
that way. I'm going to ask the question you probably get a lot. What story have you written that you consider to be your favorite, and why?
I would have to say Thicker Than Water is probably my favorite. It was written for the screen in mind. It is a manuscript. I'm not any good at writing screenplays, but I'm trying. But it was written as a manuscript for the screen. It's not a long book. It's a novella, but it's descriptive enough that it's easy to do. It's about a woman whose child is kidnapped and what she goes through to get her child back. And she takes a family hostage in a bank, the family that owns the bank, and she starts killing people to get what she wants.
It's not based on the Bee Gees song, then Love is Thicker Than Water?
No, sadly that one wasn't it. I think it was more like Cannibal Corpse, actually.
Okay. In your own mind, what's the worst thing you've ever written?
A lot of the fan fiction stuff was horrible when I was first starting out. It just really was not good. I go back and cringe. It's terrible. But there is enough there that if I choose to build on it, I can make those changes and be able to do it. Because there is enough meat there. It's fan fiction. It was a good step to get to where I'm going.
I can relate to that. I look at some stuff I wrote back when I was in my 20s and stuff, and it seemed it's so poor and juvenile, and it's
I found a novel I started in high school, and it's so angsty. It makes me want to vomit. It's terrible, but there are some elements there that can be built on. It would have to be completely dismantled, but it's so full of angst. I don't know how anyone would have ever wanted to read it.
Is there a story out there somewhere in your world of literature that you've read that you go, I wish I'd written that? Is there something out there
The newest Stephen King revival, I read that in one night. I couldn't get enough of it. It's not your typical horror. There are the elements in there, but it's a delicious story. It really is an incredible story. And I think it's one of his better ones to date, honestly. Other than that, I really enjoy Robert R. McCammon. Swan Song is one of my favorites. I love that book. I've read it many, many times because I get something new from it every time. It's a post-apocalyptic story, but it's based on a little girl and how she grows up in that world and becomes what she is. And it's really a brilliant work. It's beautiful. I enjoy it. And the Gunslinger.
Okay.
Gunslinger.
That's an interesting take. It seems, I think, when we were relating to the question I asked before about you writing in the I perspective, and when you talk about what attracts you to literature is the female point of view.
Absolutely.
You know, have you thought perhaps of flipping it a little bit and writing from a male perspective?
I have. There are a couple short stories that I've done that I've written from the male point of view. It was an interesting prospect. You know, I found it difficult because female brain. It's something I'm looking into doing with another book that I have coming out called 3. And it's based on a serial killer that didn't really intend to be one. And the main character is a male serial killer. It's a real step off from me because I generally write about female killers because there just aren't any. There's none out there. Well, that have been
caught yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
All you Lizzie Borden fans.
Yes. You know, there's a handful, but really, other than Eileen Wuornos and Lizzie Borden, what else really is there out there? There's been nobody really caught that they can study, if you will. Like they've done Ed Gein and they've done Manson and they've done all of these other ones. There's nobody out there really.
Carla Homolka.
Yeah.
Well, Homolka too. And she's dropped off the scene a bit, but I saw she was back recently. You know, but there's just a handful of women out there that you can base it on. And that's kind of sad, really. There needs to be more female serial killers.
Myra Hindley from the UK. And
I'd forgotten about her.
I think it's the Moors murders or something. I think she was connected with, and Liam Brady too, that were notorious in the UK.
I mean, granted, most of the serial killers out there are male.
Yeah.
You know, that we know of.
Yeah, 10 Rillington Place.
So why do you suppose that is, guys?
I think just women are smarter and they just don't get caught.
What is it about the male psyche, though, that drives us to?
It's probably women. I mean, we can be crazy, but you know, I don't know what it is. Chromosomal, possibly. You know, and that's one thing that I did find while I was studying is that a lot of it is chromosomal. It's not even a result of their environment. It's what they are built when they're born.
Genetically predisposed.
Absolutely.
That'd be something to go to Google Scholar and check out.
Nature versus nurture. This sort of a way that it's explained. No doubt, I think that there is there's the share of female murderers.
There are.
And, you know, not that it's a scorecard that we have to, 1 for us and 2 for you, this kind of thing.
Well, I think the ones that get the most attention too, though.
Yeah.
You'll remember that Farrah Fawcett movie, The Burning Bed,
Yeah.
based on a true story.
Yeah, I
Well, she
remember
was
that.
actually driven to murder by a man.
Yeah.
You know, which I'm sure there's a lot of ladies out there that right now
There's
are thinking,
probably
"Oh
a few
yeah,
of you out there
Well-
going, yeah,
I can relate to that."
Well, I think though, when we're thinking about, if you want to, do a little Alfred Hitchcock, you look at the quality of the murders, and you could say things like, women were more like poisoners.
Absolutely. Most women will resort to poisoning and that sort of thing. You don't find very many that will use a shotgun to blow somebody's head off, or a machete or whatever.
Yeah.
They do go to the more subtle forms of murder.
Except if you're a Lucrezia Borgia,
Well,
or
unless there's that.
in in the historical context of things. It's interesting that you picked probably picked the female point of view because it's easier and accessible.
Well, and yeah, I mean, it's what I know. I'm a woman. That's the brain waves that I know, and so it's easier for me to imagine myself, sadly, in those positions, because that's how I would respond, or that's what I would do, or whatever. I think that there's a whole lot more women out there that kill, and they are very, very, very detail oriented. And that's why they don't get caught.
Have you ever written something and thought, I've gone too far?
Yeah.
I have to pull back and I have to edit this, not
Yeah.
because of.
Yeah, Roll of the Beautiful Bones. I actually did edit the hell out of that thing, because there were a few of the kills that kept me up at night. I did edit it, but looking back at it now, the second part of that series is going to contain those kills, because it's fiction. And there's no limits in fiction. You can do whatever the heck you want. You can kill anybody however you want to kill them. It doesn't matter. There shouldn't be, just because you're a woman, that you can't write this kind of stuff. And I have heard that. I've heard many, many times, you're a woman, you shouldn't write that stuff. I do it out of spite sometimes, to be honest, because why shouldn't we? What difference does it make if it's a male writer or a female writer? And it shouldn't be more acceptable if you have a penis, and less acceptable if you don't.
Do you think some of those female writers are actually men being ghostwriter?
Absolutely.
And
yeah. And I know a couple. I know of a couple, and they do a really good job. I think what it comes down to, though, is that women are just scared to take that step. They're afraid to put themselves out there like that, because there aren't very many out there. And it's a shame, because I think that different perspective lends to more original works out there. I mean, Hollywood's got to take a step back and take a look, because there's a heck of a lot of people out there that are very, very talented that can bring that new generation in, rather than pulling from the old school classics and revamping them.
That's true, but also too in the so-called golden age of Hollywood, I think I've mentioned this before, you check on a lot of credits for a lot of the major films, and it was women.
Absolutely. I noticed that recently. I was
and a lot of women editors. And there's female directors too, besides Ida Lupino, who seems to be one of the most prevalent ones. There were many
They're
of these.
stepping forward more now into that limelight. Before they were just in the credits and sort of hidden in there, and people didn't know so much that they were involved. Now they're more into the limelight, and that's fabulous, because I think that perspective is really important.
Right. The question I always have when you're sending something for publication, do you consciously reduce your vocabulary in this particular day and age?
I don't. Personally, I look for the most obscure wording, sorry guys, I do, that I can find, because you have to use your brain. if it's written in, it can be written in everyday language, but that's why we have dictionaries. You know, I don't like to, my son put it this way, to dumb it down. I don't like to do that because it's educational. And I really think that if you find a word that you don't recognize, it's a great opportunity to look it up. And it may trigger something in their own minds to be able to create something different.
Good point. Good point. Do you have any favorite horror authors yourself?
Other than Stephen King, who's not even really horror anymore. Sorry. I read Tim Miller. He's an indie author, extreme author, and I do enjoy his work very much. To be honest, I haven't read a lot of mainstream horror lately. I found that I'm bored with it. It seems to be the same sort of situations every time. I've sort of backed away from it recently, and I'm reading more Neil Gaiman again, and you know, some sci-fi and that sort of thing, just trying to get a different perspective, because that lends to the horror as well. There's always something in there that lends to it. Philip K. Dick is one of the ones I've discovered again recently, and I'm enjoying his work. I think that, though I think he was a bit of a lunatic, that lent, in his sci-fi, you know, genre, that lent to a lot of the horror. Total Recall, for instance. You know, people don't realize that he wrote that. Blade Runner is another one that he wrote. Man in the High Castle is brilliant. I think that it all lends to the genre, and at this day and age, they're remixing them. So it helps with that. As for horror, like I said, there's really nothing out there that's interesting me these days.
While we're on that topic, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the horror world, the horror literature world, lost a great last week.
Yes.
Dallas Meyer was a great individual. He wrote under the name Jack Ketchum. I first discovered Jack back when I was about 18 years old, when he published Off Season. Up to that point in my life, I'd been reading things like some James Herbert novels and, you know, the typical standard fare of the day, you know, Shelley, Stoker. There wasn't a whole lot that was out there for the person who really enjoys, well, gore. My favorite all time has always been Richard Lehman. Richard had a way of describing brutality that was unique and very detailed. However, the problem with Mr. Lehman's writing was he technically wasn't a great writer. Jack Ketchum, on the other hand, based a lot of his work on true incidents, and he could write. I spent the greater part of, almost 40 years reading the novels and work of Jack Ketchum. He's got a short story collection called Peaceable Kingdom, where each one is like a kick to the nuts. Jack's, you know, work was made into films. Offspring, which was a sequel to Off Season. Red, the story of a veteran whose dog is killed and he wants some revenge. The Girl Next Door, which is a harrowing true tale about man's inhumanity to man, and in this case, a young girl. His voice in the horror literature community will be missed. Rest in peace, Dallas. And with that, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
In this town on Valentine's Day, everybody loses their heart. It looks like Harry Warden's back in town. In the town of Valentine Bluffs. There are many ways to die. Take your pick. My Bloody Valentine. Rated R.
All right, and we're back. We're with Melanie McCurdie, author of, and still, Miss Terry is still here.
Yeah.
It's a Terry puppet.
Yeah.
Magic is fun. We're dad. Anyway, Melanie has several short story collections and several novels available now, and we'll be putting up the websites on the bottom of the screen and all of that shortly.
My quick question, a quick answer, I guess, would be on this. Talking more about your process. Everybody has a process. I think with writing. Do you like? I know some authors that treat it as a 9-to-5 profession. They said, "I will write this. I will 9 to 5. The only day I have off is Christmas Day." Blah blah blah. How do you go about
it
writing
really
day?
goes with muse. When muse appears is when I do my best writing. This year I did join with the National Novel Writers Month, or National Writers Month, I can't remember how it was. And this was my first attempt, and I did manage to write the bulk of Lunatic Posse in those 30 days. Usually I plan for about 3 days a week that I'll sit down and I'll write for 4 to 6 hours, and that's enough. Because I think for me, if I push it too hard, I end up losing whatever that thing is that we have. I don't even have a name for it. When news appears, it could be 3 in the morning. Honey knows that. Hi, Tom. I can get up at 2 in the morning and go, okay, I gotta go. I gotta go write. And I'll write until he gets up to go to work in the morning. It could be weeks, and I won't write anything, and then I'll pump out a novella in 2 days. It's my process mainly starts with that. Whenever it's an idea, it's the title, it's Stolen Fire, for instance, is one of them. I had that in my head for a month before I started writing it, and I was just building it all in my head as I went along until I was ready to sit down and do the work. For me, it's the only way to go. I envy the people that can sit down and do it 8 hours a day. I really do envy them, because I'd love to be able to do that. Life tends to get in the way, so I take it as I get it.
How do you, and everybody gets this, and all the writers out here know, how do you cure writer's block? It does happen to us all.
It happens to us all. I went about 6 months where I just had nothing. I think it just comes down to that inspiration. You know, you can be blocked. There's several writers out there that I know of have been blocked for years in some cases, and then one day it just happens. It can be a title, it can be somebody you see walking down the street, and all of a sudden it'll kick in, and you can't force it. You just can't. If you force it, it's not organic, and it's not raw, and it's not anything to build on. It becomes mundane, I think.
I'm exactly like you are. Every once in a while, the inspiration hits. Or I'll dream something, and I get up, and it's a matter of you have to write it now.
You have to. You can't say, no, I'm going back to sleep. It's like a drive inside you. You have no choice. You have to get up and write.
Would you consider yourself a tortured artist?
Only when I'm writer's blocked. Then it's torture. It's absolute torture. No, absolutely not. I mean, inspiration is everywhere. It's just a matter of how you use it. I think tortured artists come down to the actual artists. You know, one's cut off their ear and all that kind of stuff. For writers, in my opinion, it doesn't come down to that.
No, yeah, I probably tend to agree with you there. For me, I think, there's no torture in it. when you're being creative.
No. It's pleasure. It's
And I don't care if anybody ever reads it. I post stuff,
Exactly.
and if they read it and get something out of it, it's great. But it's the act itself of getting your words and concepts out there that I find, satisfactory.
And sometimes it's just not good. And you know it. It's just a matter of that free write and that freedom to write. If it's good, you know it. And that's when it evolves into something else.
Well, I always have a problem with that.
You do?
Oh yeah, sometimes I look at it and go, well, is this shit or not? You
Well,
know?
send it to me. I'll read it.
Damn, I was rated as shit. Thanks, Mel.
I'd be nice about it. Maybe.
Okay, so when you get down to the grue, and you're describing very gruesome things, what are you feeling? What drives you before you write a scene like that? Is it personal anger? Is it something that's just going on in your life?
Anger, it can be a personal situation. It can be music that I hear. And there's a lot of writers out there. I know you listen to heavy metal when you write. When I'm writing a kill scene, it's Gordon Lightfoot. And I'm not kidding. It can, I'm serious. I'm dead serious. For me, being angry really does help that drive to do it. You want to kill that person you're pissed off at. For Roll the Bones, honestly, I laughed the whole time I was writing. I was sitting there giggling like a loon. It was, my kids were freaked out because I'm laughing as I'm writing this horrific, disgusting stuff. It's pleasure for me. It's fun for me. I really enjoy it because it's that freedom. We're always so PC. We're always so in that box.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, you're not. It's that freedom to be out of that and just let it go. And there's something about blood flying. It's beautiful.
That's true. Yeah, to me, it comes down to more of, and I shouldn't talk because I'm not an author. If I did anything, it'd be a collection of blog posts or essays rather than. But I do have a very good story about some serial killers.
You should write it.
Yeah, well, I did actually at one point, and then my hard drive went. I had 3/4 of a zombie novel written, back way before the zombie craze hit, back in the early 90s, and my short story. So yeah, it was painful, and I've never recreated it.
It's hard to recreate when that happens. I lost 400 pages of original fiction 2 years ago, and it was devastating. That's when my writer's block kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
You can't recreate something like that. You can try, but it's never going to be the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Even with a photographic memory, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
400 pages.
I
grieve
puked,
with you.
And then I cried. Yeah, it was awful. It was awful.
So the moral of the story is save your work.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
External
I learned
hard
my
drive.
lesson.
Yeah, push, save,
Oh,
file.
no, and I did. My motherboard went, and
Okay.
it couldn't be saved. So yeah, I puked, and then I cried.
I wrote about my puking and put it in the book.
Yeah, well, and now I save it in 4 or 5 different places because I'm terrified it's going to happen again.
Watch for the new short horror story about Melanie McCurdie about a horror writer who loses her hard drive and pukes.
Yeah. That
Coming
should be
soon.
fun, shouldn't it?
Coming soon to Google Drive.
Exactly.
If
Not
you're
that we
interested-
push Google here.
If you're interested in the screenwrites, they are available. Just contact
Just
Melanie.
let me know.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be several big-time producers
I'm
circling
positive
that
of it.
project. So,
Oh, you guys.
the Lunatic. When can we expect to see the Lunatic Posse?
I'm expecting it'll be out in the fall. It's sitting at almost 400 pages now. It needs some editing, but I'm pretty happy with it. It's completely different from what I've written before. It is more dystopian, which is brand kind of new for me. I usually like the hack and slash. I don't generally go into that, but Posse's different. it's something that has been in here in the back of my head for a very long time, and it was originally 4 pieces that amounted to about 5,000 words. That I thought, no, there's more to this story, and so I started recreating it. 95% of what's in there is brand new original fiction. And it will be coming to screen because it needs to. It's one of those things that it needs to come to screen.
Speaking of the screen, you're no stranger to the horror filmmaking genre.
Nope.
You were in The Orphan Killer too. Tell us about that.
Yes, I was, by Matt Farnsworth. Hi, Matt. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. I had a tag team axe kill, which is what I really, really wanted. I really wanted that axe kill. And it was hard work. It was a very emotional. I didn't expect that it would be. I had no idea that it would be. Mm-hmm. It changed me in a few ways, but it was so much fun. It was just so much fun getting to learn about, the backstage and the makeup and all of the stuff that went with it was really eye-opening. And I learned how to scream. That was fun. And it was really a learning process. It really taught me a whole lot about where I wanted to be in my career.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us briefly what the movie's about and where a person could find it? Or?
It is a movie about Marcus Miller, the orphan killer, and his sister, and they go on a killing spree. And there's a lot of, I've forgotten the word, tributes to the killers, Michael Myers, and that sort of thing in it, because Matt's a fan. And they were brilliantly done. It was very well shot. I really had a great time for the week that I was there.
You shot where?
In LA.
In LA, okay.
Yeah. And it was just really a highlight of my life at that point, because I knew where I wanted to go. It really did change my direction, because I want to make movies. That's in TV. That's where I'm heading towards.
Good.
And they can find it. I don't know actually right now. I will have to contact Matt, because the last I heard he was re-editing it for release. So I'll have to check in with him and find out what the deal is there.
Okay. Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, I will.
We'll promote it on an upcoming episode.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have a question. Should we go to the question?
Let's do.
Ask away.
I'm told we have a question.
From our voluminous viewer male.
Thank you.
Or voluminous viewer female, depending on how you look at
There
it.
could be some females, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We have one from Brandon Edmonton.
Oh.
What are your thoughts on the modern trend of found footage horror films such as August Underground and the Poughkeepsie tapes?
To be honest, I haven't seen them, mostly because found footage really irritates me. Blair Witch was really the original. It was unique for its time. I can't say that it was scary. It didn't frighten me, but it was interesting, the way that it was shot, the way that it was promoted. Everything was really just fascinating about it. I find the shaky camera, I lose interest.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, mostly because I'm getting old and I can't really see that well, but also because it doesn't lend to good movie making for me.
That's interesting, because we talked a little bit about Blair Witch before on a previous episode that you can look up and catch our full comments on this. I found the original Blair Witch, because there was that remake that was done. Mm-hmm. The original Blair Witch, which was shot for the small screen, television. Yes. And when you blow a television film up to the larger screen, it doesn't sometimes work that well.
Loses its
I think in that case, with the squishy camera work, the yet to be perfected Steadicam of the running and all the little arbitrary images now that they do better, then perhaps it would have been shot as a theatrical film, not a television film.
Well, well, I mean, I think they were trying to get that look of somebody with a handheld cam out. I mean, that's
in the forest.
But I mean, that's fine and dandy. I mean, if you're watching on a computer, you can take that little bit of shakiness here and there. But on the big screen, it's like
Even the forest. I mean, I thought it was a very interesting storyline, but the found footage in it just it didn't lend to a good movie for me. I just really didn't enjoy that part of it.
I think more from my point of view for that film, it was trying to explore the quality of fear in the young people that were happening. It was more the effect of the surroundings and what they saw and what they thought they saw. And I guess back then it did start a phenomenon of some type and everything. It was a large movement. Plus, it came from the time when camcorders were cool.
Yes.
And new, and this was new technology.
Yeah, and it spawned a whole
genre.
A whole genre. And thankfully, it's kind of gone now by the wayside. You'll see it used occasionally,
but not.
But then it'll be filled with backstory and that sort of thing. So it's
a little bit. I think is all right. It's just that when it's like with the original, it was all the shaky camera and it was all the rage because it was new and it was something different. We've moviegoers have sort of evolved since then. So a little bit is okay because, like you said, it lends to that appearance of fear and what they are feeling in the fear, running mad and all of that sort of stuff. But I don't think it makes a really decent film in itself.
Well, a couple that come to mind, there's one called Dawn of the Dead, and there was another zombie film, and I can't recall the name of it. But they were trying that, using camcorders and trying to do their thing. And the problem was they were shooting at night, and with no real lighting.
And it was probably too dark.
Well, yeah, I mean, the cameras themselves would have had a really, really awful lux rating. So when you're trying to watch it on a big screen, you've lost the image. Yeah, and the problem is the minute you start in the editing suite to try to boost it up, all you're doing is you're boosting the grain. So you kind of have to leave it there, or reshoot.
And I think that films shot at night are fantastic, but the lighting has to come into play.
Well, like anything else.
It really does. And the one thing that I was speaking to my nephew recently, and we were discussing different things. One thing that always has come up is shooting in night vision, and that's something you don't see very often anymore.
I thought
on
not
occasion.
Not anymore.
I've seen it in animation.
There's a lot,
and I don't know anime, but I mean in like animation, like some of the DC stuff and some of the Marvel stuff and the shouldn't call them cartoons, but that sort of thing. It's interesting that you brought up about shooting at night because there have been some big budget films. Peter Greenaway's The Draftsman's Contract is shot entirely in candlelight.
Yeah.
And,
I saw that.
And Barry Lyndon was shot in. Well, his candlelight scenes were real candlelight, but mind you, that's Stanley Kubrick.
Well, and that's a little different. Yeah.
It's a little different than somebody with a camcorder doing it that way.
Right. If you notice a little bit of sound this evening, that's from the furnace kicking in because it is the last day of January here while we're shooting this, and it is a cold bitch out there.
Very.
And we're a hot show.
Yeah. And normally we would try to turn the furnace off, but
it gets cold.
Yeah, you just slowly watch as some time lapse turn into Jack Nicholson at the end of The Shining. So you don't, that's not really good entertainment value. Yeah, found footage. I can take it or leave it now. It's run the gamut, I think. Keith Coley last episode.
Yes.
Mentioned a movie called Weir, W-E-R.
Yes.
The French film. And they use a little bit in there. Yes. And I wanted to tell our viewers that when it comes to a werewolf film, it's a really intriguing take on the werewolf. and it's gory, it's well done, it's well shot. It's a treat. So if you can get your hands on it, from 2013, Weir, W-E-R. Check that out. There's a plug for you.
It seems to be the French are doing more, not necessarily just them, but doing more dangerous stuff these days.
Mm-hmm.
Than, with the extremist movement that's been going
Yeah.
on. I, for one, am not one for gory films, I admit it that way. But I have watched Martyrs, the original.
Yeah.
And I think it's called Calvary or Calvaire.
Calvaire.
Yeah, Calvaire. And it is subtitled The Ordeal.
Right. I
That,
saw it in French, I think.
yeah. And there's not so much found footage in it, but there is the Steadicam work
Okay.
done in a lot of the cases. And it begins with, and it creates, I think, the Steadicams, what they tried to do was what some of the French filmmakers did a long time ago in the 60s, was to create this, I'm not going to get the right word, but to get the true-to-life feeling of it, the kitchen sink drama, the actual...
The reality of
Yes,
it.
the reality. You know. Federico Fellini did one on and called Rome Open City, which was a war film.
Yes.
And it was shot entirely like that. I know we're off topic on horror pictures and everything, but this is not a new genre. It's just been applied to the horror genre.
Right. Well, we have another question.
Oh.
Okay. This is from Jay Shelley. Hello, my friends. What's your intake on films on civilization cannibals versus primitive cannibals? Also, Blood Diner versus Cannibal Holocaust versus Eating Raoul.
I didn't like Raoul. He didn't taste very good.
It's funny.
Maybe ragu.
Funny you should say that.
Yes.
Here's an addendum on the question. Plus, here is a joke for Terry. Why do cannibals not eat clowns? They taste funny. Okay.
Happy entrails to you.
I don't know. For me, cannibal movies they don't do it for me.
Well, myself, the first thing that pops to mind is Cannibal Ferox, which I saw once. Because I wanted to check it out. There's so much talk about it. Would I ever watch Cannibal Ferox again? No. And the reason for that is because of the footage they use showing actual animals being killed. And I cannot abide by that.
No.
I don't consent to that. And then there's Cannibal Holocaust. And if you go the other spectrum, you can get into Cannibal the Musical by Matt and Trey from South Park.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I gotta check that one out.
And, Motel Hell.
Okay.
Most recently, I guess the most recent cannibal film I saw was Eli Roth's The Green Inferno.
I lasted 10 minutes. It's not my cup of tea, I guess.
Well, and the questioner is very accurate with that, because it usually comes down to one of two things. It comes down to tribes that actually still practice cannibalism, or you take it from a comedic standpoint. Yeah, so, and Blood Diner that he mentions is kind of funny, because that was originally supposed to be a Herschel Gordon Lewis film.
What was it?
Yeah, which would have been Blood Feast 2. And I could see where it would very easily could have been a Herschel movie. It's so crazily 80s. At the beginning, you have a guy coming in with two children. And it could easily have been the character of Fuad Ramses. Instead, they've changed the name to Uncle Anwar. And so, it could have just easily flowed from there, and then it goes to 20 years later, and you've got these two kids, and they're trying to raise a Egyptian goddess back, Shitar.
Does it bring new meaning to the term teen burger? Is this what
Yeah,
you're saying?
well,
Not that we're plugging that particular fast food venue that does sell those.
well, they're trying. They're trying to raise Chateau, and they go out and they're killing prostitutes and they're killing women and the
Prostitutes and women.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but the one thing that stands out in my mind is a woman, fully nude, 80s bush, the whole works, doing kung fu. It's the only real totally nude kung fu fight I've ever seen. And it easily could have been a Herschel film. I don't think it had some of the social commentary that would have been a Herschel movie. And there is more profanity than I'm sure Herschel would have been comfortable with. Which is, I'll tell you right off the bat, Mr. Lewis did not like cussing or swearing in his screenplays. You could do practically anything else, but
swearing was not it.
Yeah. So, I don't think myself that cannibal films appeal to me anymore.
I think as I've gotten older, it's lost its.
Well, it's either a documentary about a tribe, a lost tribe, or an existing tribe that consume humans, or it's, like I say, the funny take on it.
There's really no in between.
Well, I mean, there is.
There is, but I mean, for interest level, for me personally, it's
the movie Alive about the soccer team in the plane crash.
Oh, that's right.
That had to resort to cannibalism. I mean,
What
that's
about-
actually right off the front page headlines.
What about as an element of the story, though? As a part of the film? Because actually, in the werewolf legend, the werewolf is not only kills, but they eat.
They eat human.
Mm-hmm.
To an extent, I think, as an element, like you said, an element of. It adds to it, but it wouldn't be something, a whole film based solely on cannibalism that would interest me. It just.
No, I mean, zombies are cannibals when you think about it.
Yes.
It's true.
Yes.
There's always the eating scene.
Yes.
But I think just it's if you're going to go out and glorify somebody actually being cannibalistic, like certain serial killers and stuff, I'm not particularly sure I actually want to see it as such. Yeah, it's harmless enough.
I suppose.
But I mean, because I know it's a prop leg.
Well, yeah.
I know that what they're pulling on isn't real flesh, But then again, it's just the depiction of the act, I think, is, and I'm getting older too. My sensibilities are changing.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm getting at too. It's as we get older, it's just not of interest anymore.
What about like in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre? With, the scene with the table.
Mm-hmm.
That was an interesting moment because isn't that the part where she first wakes up and she's been.
I think so.
Yeah.
And then there's Hannibal. The TV series, I have to admit, was beautifully done.
Oh yeah.
It was gorgeous. That I would sit and watch because it wasn't just that element. There was so much more involved.
Well, even then, in first of all, Silence of the Lambs, he's referred to as Hannibal the Cannibal. It's not until you get to the sequel where you actually see anything where he's got the skull cap removed and he's Ray Liotta's head. So it's, and you've seen it sometimes, and what's being cooked in the pot is. But I mean,
it's not blatant. I think. I mean, it's he's eating human, but it's not in your face sort of thing. I thought it was just beautifully written and beautifully shot, and it wasn't so blatant. Mm-hmm. Even people who don't enjoy horror were watching the show because it had so much more to it.
Right.
What about that zombie television series that's on? The woman, the girl, she eats the brain and becomes a personality. Is that iZombie?
I think so. I've never seen iZombie.
I've not. It's for third year because used to come on after Supergirl. I'm plugging that, one of my favorites.
Santa Clara Diet right now.
No. So.
Well, that was kind of
Yeah, it's a cool show, but I mean, it's well, again, it's a zombie thing. So is it really cannibalism? To me, implies and denotes that one human being is consuming the flesh of another human being.
And they know that what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're cognizant of what they're doing.
Is it an offshoot of zombies then? You know, has the zombie phenomenon been done to death? If you pardon the pun, done to death, and you know, and we are merely resurrecting old themes, and this is part of it, or has the zombie come from the cannibal theme? Because cannibal themes.
Well,
the way the zombie was set up in the Romero zombies, not the
right. Well, I mean, that was the consumption of human flesh.
Yeah.
Or in a way, because I mean, it was through transmission by biting, but they do want to eat your flesh, and it wasn't until Return of the Living Dead that the whole brain thing happened.
Okay.
Brain.
Send more cops. Yeah.
Yeah, send more cops.
Yeah.
So. You know, did it derive from cannibalism? Well, I guess so, as an element of horror.
Yeah.
Well,
know.
Cannibalism's been a crime, though. Like, it's been, you know,
but it's
people
still
in jail for that
in the Western world.
Before time.
Yeah.
But it's still practiced today by certain tribes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would probably try human if I didn't have to go to jail for it, just to say I did. It's meat.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, I mean, then there's other stuff we won't go into.
Well, there's the argument that, of course, if you were in a plane crash, like the Brazilian soccer
You'd
team,
have no choice.
you know, your survival instinct kicks in, the lizard brain kicks in, and yeah, you would.
You would do what you
You
have
know,
to do to
however,
survive.
yeah, you know, because you know your survival instinct kicks in.
Absolutely.
You know, so you know, but would I prefer to try it? No, not really. Eating seal brains and stuff like the Inuit do won't do it for me. You know,
Head
things
cheese.
like that. Head cheese.
Head cheese.
Monkey
and
brain,
cheese,
no.
no,
I
head cheese, no.
couldn't, no.
If it means anything, they closed a Wendy's near me, and I'm still kind of upset about that. And human flesh, no, not for me. Not saying that there won't be a moment, you know, perhaps, you know, of doubt and pain if things are forced upon you and situations are forced upon you.
Given the choice, I mean, if you had a choice of death or not, well, yeah.
I saw a film, and I can't remember whether it's called Eat. I think it was.
What a unique title.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
but it was about a woman who slowly is cannibalizing herself. And of course, Stephen King touched upon that in a short story as well, about the guy on an island, and he's a doctor,
right.
and he knows how to tie everything off, and you know,
Yeah.
slowly by slowly, he's, you know, cutting pieces off of himself to try to survive until you know, a possible rescue ship will come to get him. But yeah, so it's always been an element of horror, but.
Well, I mean, I think it just comes down to how human brains work too. I mean, you wouldn't go out and order, you know, a human burger at McDonald's just for the sake of it. You know?
Soylent Green is people.
I wouldn't. Nor would I watch the Reader's Digest either.
Well, you know, I mean, if it was a survival situation, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Forced upon you, as you said. I think that we also have to accept that there are still tribes out there that they've survived how many thousands of years by this practice.
And a lot of times, sociologically speaking, it comes down to alpha male sort of thing. Younger person taking out the older person and consuming his brain because you're supposed to, and his heart
Because
to
you're
get his
assuming
courage and
possessions.
his
The consumer society, so to speak.
yes. Oh.
I,
Supply, simple market economy, supply and demand.
yes, supply and demand, yes. Like James said, Soylent Green is people. Ritz cracker, no, I can't say that because I'll get in trouble with somebody. But as an element, you know, again, we all say that we would do it, but to me that question is like if somebody always asks you, what would you do if you won $1 million?
Yeah.
You don't know until it actually happens.
And the chances of us ever being put into that position, realistically, is small.
Yeah.
Well, it's about the same as me eating human flesh, really.
Yeah, it's...
probably have a greater chance of eating human flesh than I would winning the lottery.
Wow, that's... I hope nobody's enjoying food while watching this particular podcast. You might want to stop, and we'll continue on, though, with more.
Okay, we'll do that right after this.
I've just been going through a lot lately.
Like what?
I haven't landed a role in over 3 years.
You can say whatever you want to, darling. But the truth is, you're terrible. That's why you don't get the parts.
Oh, and I got in a car accident. When I got home, my landlady told me I was going to be evicted. So I don't know, I just snapped, you know?
Jesus. What happened to your foot?
From the car accident.
You didn't tell me about that.
I didn't?
No, you didn't tell me about your foot.
Sweetie, what happened? Why did you do this to yourself?
I need your help. I feel like I'm starving.
Miss McClure, the wound on your hand is a bite mark. I'm going to put you on 24-hour suicide watch.
I can't live like this anymore.
What? Don't you hate people? I'm not a cannibal! Well, then what the are
you? Do you want to talk about it? This anger? This rage? Let's talk about that night. You went up there just like always, to watch them, doing what you dreamed of doing. You killed those 2 young people. You took that steel hook and you butchered them.
13 years ago, a brutal killer struck.
Bye-bye.
Hey, sexy. So we on? Tonight? Fears up? Clothes off.
Today is Valentine's Day, and I know you all have love on your minds.
Be careful.
Hi there. The hell do you want?
Brad and I are going up to Lover's Lane. Make sure that Michael finds us there.
Now, it looks like history
Oh, good God.
is about to repeat itself.
Chloe.
The hook's out. He went over a wall today.
Police have still failed to apprehend escaped murderer Ray Hennessy, convicted 13 years ago for the Valentine's Day slaying of a young couple on a remote road known as Lover's Lane.
This time it'll be our kids.
You think this guy's on a vendetta? That's just plain crazy. Where are they?
Try Lover's Lane if you can find it.
Did you hear something?
Oh, come on. Don't tell me that you're scared.
Lover's Lane. Come with us if you dare into a twilight world of unspeakable horror.
You must die. Everybody must die.
Sample, if you dare, the deadly passion of the vampire lovers. The vampire lovers. Perverted creatures of the night find their victims everywhere. the unsuspecting merrymakers in glittering ballrooms with their young and tender throats. The sleeping beauties whose troubled dreams turn into real, terrifying nightmares.
It was a cat! A huge cat!
For God's sake, save her!
No rest for the vampire lovers. No escape till their evil hearts are stilled for all eternity. If one remains, yes, even one, there will be thousands more. Beware. Beware the cold caress, the kiss that kills. Beware the vampire lovers.
Welcome back. I'm here with my co-host Terry Sherwood, horror author Melanie McCurdie.
Hi.
And we are taking questions. This one is from Belinda out of Saskatoon. Is there any other true crime murderer that has had more influence on the horror genre than serial killer Ed Gein? Ed Gein was a cannibalistic, skin-wearing, ooh, here's
Sexy.
Coincidence, skin-wearing necrophiliac serial killer in the 50s. His crimes spawned the Robert Bloch novel Psycho in 1959, which inspired Hitchcock to film Psycho in 1960. The movie Three and a Meat Hook from 1972 was also inspired by Gein, along with Deranged 1974 and the classic Chainsaw Massacre 1974. Also, Silence of the Character, Jamie Gum, also known as Buffalo Bill, was based on Gein's crimes. Wow. Ours is a pedantic relationship, isn't it? Okay, well, a serial killer, more influence on the horror genre. Well, I'm going to say one right off the bat, Jack the Ripper.
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah, Jack the Ripper.
Countless novels, countless films.
Even up to today.
Yes, and there's still the interpretation. If you're looking at that type of unsolved cases, there's the Black Dahlia.
Yeah.
You know, in L.A. I'm sure you can
That was very brutal.
look that up, and there was an anniversary a few years ago.
Yeah.
Or not actually, last month from when this podcast was done about when the body was found. And it's on the internet, the full photographs and everything. Canada who? Paul Bernardo,
Carla Homolka.
Probably, yeah.
You know, I personally, I find it a little bit offensive that we're remembering these people's names when we should be remembering the victims, because these are the people and the families. What we're doing here is we're not glorifying them, we're not glorifying their crimes. We're merely mentioning the influence that they may have had on certain filmmakers.
Okay, well, maybe in certain cases that's probably maybe a good thing, because if you read the transcripts, and I think it was an Anne Rule book about Homolka and Bernardo.
Yeah.
You know, some of the fucking things that they did.
Were horrible.
You know, I wouldn't want them to, you know, if it was my daughter that they did, I wouldn't want it known that, you know, Bernardo was squatting over her, taking a dump on her head. You know, it's...
Let's draw the line and say anybody's daughter.
Anybody's daughter.
Anybody's
child.
Kid.
Yeah.
Anybody's thing.
Yeah. What I think we can do is we can almost break it into archetypes, because you would have an Ed Gein archetype and his particular modus operandi. You would have a Ted Bundy.
There's one for sure.
You know, because Ted Bundy's crimes and the way, you know, the charming sort of sociopath.
Even Eileen Wuornos to an extent as well. You know, she's inspired many people, being one of the only serial killers, female serial killers that was ever in custody.
John Gacy.
In modern times.
John Gacy.
Yeah, John Wayne Gacy.
Of course, everybody will naturally speak of Mr. Manson, Charles Manson.
Which is strange because, well, yeah, you look at recent films like, I think
Tarantino's doing one.
Yeah,
Tarantino's
in the process of doing one. The thing, though, with Mr. Manson and his followers, Charles Manson, is that he became a media star towards all this because of the high profile of what happened.
Absolutely.
And the availability of evidence, and which even now, and the fact that some of his followers are still alive.
And it wasn't Manson doing the actual killing himself anyway, you know?
I mean, so there has been some suspicion and some new evidence that's come to light that he did commit murders on his own. But there's no real solid evidence to that fact. He was just that charismatic leader that could convince these people to do what he wanted to do.
Well, charismatic in a way to a certain type of individual.
Drugs had a lot to do with it.
You know?
I think, too, you're right, you know, but I think there was a moment in time there, because you're dealing with, what, 1968, 69? You're dealing with a California culture. You're dealing with drug use. You're dealing probably with lost kids. The whole commune life is coming, is there.
Do you think, though, that if the victims didn't happen to be Polanski and Sharon Tate, that it would still be talked about the way that it was?
Yeah, in some ways, it is. One of the ones was Abigail Folger.
Folger, the heiress.
Yeah, Jay Sebring,
the hairdresser.
There was also a Canadian influence with that. The young lady's name escapes my mind, but I believe she was from Montreal. That was proven to be one of the kills that they committed as well.
There was also a fellow, it's listed in more of the crime, there was a fellow that just went up there to discuss stereos, and he was killed at the gate. That was the first.
He was in his car, I think.
Yeah, he got out to open a gate or something, and whatever. One of the moments I found about it was actor Steve McQueen was actually invited to that party.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And McQueen was invited to the party, and obviously he didn't go. And it was later found that his name was on a hit list from Charles. He was one of the ones.
I still don't believe that Manson was human anyway.
Yeah, well, not much of a human soul in there.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends how far you want to take it. I mean, one could argue O.J. Simpson had his moments.
Hell, you could look at Lizzie Borden. She's influenced how much? Whether she was guilty or not, she's influenced many, many, many movies, stories, books.
Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte comes to mind.
Yeah.
The Boston Strangler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zodiac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
But
There's
I think,
David
you know,
Berkowitz.
Son of Sam. Yeah.
You know, again, not glorifying what these people have done, more of how they have influenced filmmakers that tell a story of society.
Yeah, so, you know, I mean, obviously I would say, you know, Guine, yes, was very influential. I mean, you know, you take the elements, you know, the skin wearing, that, of course, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what else could you say, you know?
There's nothing.
Buffalo Bill,
Yeah.
you know. It's
good old Bill.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about these unlawful killers, and this is one that has never been proven, but it was lawful. It was Lieutenant William Kelly and the My Lai massacre. He went to his grave denying complicity in it. Whether it happened, it did happen. But again, this is sanctioned murder.
Yeah. And that's something that's not really touched on very often.
No, well, it's not really murder if the government sanctions it, is it? You know, the old biblical 10 commandment, thou shalt not kill. Well, unless, you know, it's government sanctioned, or unless it's military, or unless it's, you know. No, but I mean, yeah, I guess Gein, the archetype of Ed Gein, the archetype of Ted Bundy, you know, Jack the Ripper.
I mean, Jack is one of the bigger ones.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, there's so many books and so many movies. You know, James Spader in Jack is Back, I think it was called. There's since motion pictures were being made, there've been Jack the Ripper.
Well, yeah.
You know,
he's been disguised as the Lodger
mm-hmm.
in several films, in silent films. I think Alfred Hitchcock did one.
So yeah,
a silent picture. Jack Palance was in one.
Was he?
Yeah. Yeah, he was in this 50s remake of it, The Lodger again. There are so many. They're thinly disguised Jack the Rippers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his particular methodology, even down to that in its own ways. You know, with the entrails being laid out. And,
yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer as well. These are the names that come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, you know, people aren't killed, murdered all the time. These guys had a particular flair for it. Yeah, if you want to.
Do you think the media played a part?
Absolutely.
All these ones that we name.
We wouldn't remember their names if they weren't as, for lack of a better term, glorified in the media. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't remember the names of the victims.
But again, you know, you have whole authors who make their whole living off of telling true crime tales. Anne Rule, you know, being the one that pops to my mind right away.
Ed McBain.
There's another one.
You know, so yeah, I think that, you know, it's a good question because I mean, it's amazing how much killers have influenced our perceptions in our society when it comes right down to it.
We're getting into a whole different discussion too about the media coverage and how things work. Like we'll touch on a touching moment of Columbine Massacre, how long that was on television, and how did that have affected people daily, the bombarding footage,
Well, and you become desensitized to it, I think, after a while as well. You know, it doesn't affect you the same way as it did because it's in your face all of the time.
Yeah, Sandy Hook, all of these.
Yeah.
I gave up on mainstream media. It's just you're constantly being barraged by it.
You know, and filmmakers, yes, because it is part of society, and
there's an interest out there, like investigation, discovery, the stuff that they play on there. People are just obsessed by murder.
And people take, and no doubt, as something to that, they will take a moment and try to sift through all the evidence and solve the crime because they
armchair detectives they're out there, and in some cases they've actually cracked a case where the police couldn't do it. Just maybe because of a fresh set of eyes. Who knows?
That are actually in their heads.
Actually in their heads in a jar.
Yes.
You know.
I don't know why I said that.
Actually, that reminded me of something from Blood Diner, where Uncle Anwar is preserved in a jar, his eyeballs and his penis. His operandi was man walking down the street holding an axe in one hand and his genitals in the other.
That's like, have you ever seen two men walking abreast?
No, I didn't know you could put a leash on them. I came across a woman yesterday. Yes, so did I.
On that note, I looked out the window and saw a tall girl. How do you know she was tall? We were on the 6th floor.
With that, we're going to take a short break. My first review this evening is from my zombie movie rating guide. It's a review of The Walking Dead, a hardcore parody. Zombie porn. What more can I say that I haven't already said? If you're a fan, that's your business. But how anyone gets himself off while watching what amounts to acts of necrophilia still bewilders me. As far as the porn goes, this is pretty standard fare. 130 minutes worth of pretty standard fare. This is long even for a porn compilation. Are they actually trying to tell a story between money shots? Well, yes they are. The first thing one notices is that the porn version of these characters are much uglier and more heavily tattooed than their AMC counterparts. Here is the plot in a nutshell. Rick awakens inside the deserted hospital. He wanders until he comes to a door which reads, "Dead inside. Fuck them." He is jumped upon by a female zombie who starts blowing him, and instead of being concerned that she will bite his cock off or otherwise infect him, he protests, "What are you doing? I'm married." He isn't even concerned by her appearance. He just doesn't look down much. Rick goes home. His family isn't there. He gets nostalgic as he goes through some keepsakes and finds Laurie's dildo. He sniffs it. While Shane and Laurie begin making out, they are interrupted by Carl. Carl is played by a 20-something actor who appears profoundly retarded. Carl leaves and goes to Sophia's tent. 20-something Sophia has stolen a vibrator from Laurie and wastes no time in using it. Andrea is a frustrated lesbian. She can't find any clam to munch on, so she cuts off the dicks of the undead to use as dildos. She informs the other survivors that if a zombie swallows cum, they die. A group of walkers attack. Sophia is eaten. Not eaten the way you were assuming, just bitten. We're introduced to Daryl Dixon, who looks like Steve Buscemi's skinnier, younger brother. He dispatches a few zombies and then decides to have a three-way with two dead women. There is copious fucking and sucking. Curiously, the two zombie women retain enough of their humanity to remember how to manipulate each other's clitorises. Daryl pays no heed to what must be a vile odor, not to mention the fact that they are also dead. The zombies kneel before him to accept his chode and die immediately after he delivers. Rick finds the others. Carl asks him if he can help to find Sophia because she was going to put dildos in her ass. Rick tells Carl that she must be a special girl, the kind you don't put on a short bus. Rick looks for Laurie and walks in while Shane is spreading her ass cheeks. Shane explains that he is looking for Sophia. "In my wife's asshole?" Rick asks quite justifiably. The two men engage in fisticuffs until they tire and then decide that they should double penetrate Laurie. Laurie makes a series of funny noises during the proceedings, and when it's over, she thanks them. Shane can't accept the fact that the threesome was a one-time thing. Rick's way of saying thanks for looking after his family while he was gone. He picks up a gun to kill Rick, but Laurie shoots and kills him. Shane begins to turn, so Rick pulls out his cock for Shane to suck, knowing that his load will kill him. Laurie decides to kill him the old-fashioned way instead and shoots him again. Andrea decides to go to the hospital to see if she can find Sophia alive. There, she's attacked by multiple zombies. When all looks lost for her, she is miraculously saved by Michonne. They decide to drink deeply of each other's vital juices. Andrea is covered by a sufficient amount of tattoos to denote mental illness. The rest of the gang are also looking for Sophia. Their chances of survival appear slim until they are rescued by Glenn. Glenn is played by a Caucasian wearing the most ridiculous Asian eye makeup I've ever witnessed. The dude looks more like a Vulcan version of Adam Sandler than an Asian. I wondered why they'd put a white guy to play an Asian guy in a porn flick. Actually, no, I didn't. The answer's quite obvious, isn't it? I feel it's important to point out here that I'm only half Japanese. Rick and the group find the zombified Sophia on a rooftop. Rick decides that Carl needs to become a man in this harsh new world they inhabit, so he encourages him to mouthfuck her and kill her with his cum. A rite of passage, if you will. Carl throws her on a mattress. Why there is a mattress on a rooftop was never explained to my satisfaction, but I quibble, no? Carl proves to be a giving lover. He generously goes down on her to facilitate easier penetration. He is pleased when Sophia reciprocates. They engage in coitus in various positions until inevitably Carl must perform his wonderful yet sad duty. Andrea says she knows of a safe place. When they arrive there, Mr. Spock, Glenn, finds a working computer. Rick has trouble dealing when they discover that they may be the last humans left. Suddenly, zombies attack. A bloodbath ensues, which uses up all of their remaining bullets. There are still 2 female zombies left. What to do? An orgy seems to be the only viable solution at this point. This goes on until the 2 zombies succumb and succumb. I never thought I'd get to use that. And that's a wrap. The movie just kind of ends there, thus robbing the viewer of any real resolutions to the remaining questions that leap to mind. Like I said, pretty standard fare. At least there was no ass-to-mouth action or zombie scat. These people may be necrophiliacs, but they're not sick. Surprisingly, the makeup and special effects here aren't bad. They're actually better than some serious attempts at zombie filmmaking. There really isn't much more to say, except that the actor who plays Rick does a really good imitation of Andrew Lincoln's voice. Well, there you have it. I decided to provide a plot synopsis this one time for those who like to whack or rub to this nonsense. Now you can enjoy the film the way porn should be enjoyed. Fast-forwarding through anything that isn't fucking. Thank me later. Hi, we're back.
I'm front.
Yeah, these guys are actually sipping on apple pie flavored moonshine.
It's real.
That Melanie brought from Tennessee. So
don't try this at home, kids.
Unless you're 18 and over or 21 in other parts of the country.
Wow, you guys are so
It's available in the home version of this. It's the home version of this podcast, Sinister Inclinations.
So we talked earlier about our guest last week, Keith Coley, recommending some horror films, some werewolf films.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned 2. The first one I already mentioned, Weir. The second one was called Late Phases. And I watched that as well. It's a really nice little film. I quite enjoyed it. Again, a different perspective, not a lot of killing, but more character-driven. It's about a blind Vietnam vet who moves into a old folks' retirement home. Kids kind of put him there. And he's kind of like your, in his own way, kind of like Al Pacino in Descent of a Woman.
Oh,
You know, he's kind of a bitter kind of guy because he's blind and, you know. And
I thought of Dog Day Afternoon.
Dog Day Afternoon, yeah.
Does he scream Attica?
No. and he was getting fisted like Al Pacino and, yeah, no, in Cruising.
Or Cruising.
Yeah. But no, he's kind of a bitter guy, and the first day he moves in, he meets this nice woman who's also a resident there, and that evening she's killed by a werewolf. And so he decides, well, he doesn't really have a whole lot to live for. He says, you know, the next full moon's in 30 days. You know, he's going to go and use his training. And it's quite an involved tale. It's quite interesting. And the only thing that really detracts from it are the shitty werewolf costumes. They're terrible. You know, it's like the mask.
Oh my God.
You know, so you can't have any expression on the mask. If you did it prosthetically, at least, you know, you could
growl.
Yeah, you know, so it looks like...
Do that again.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. Well, at least I can move my eyebrows, unlike Sylvester Stallone.
That's... Never mind.
As an aside, Mr. Stallone apparently has had both, like, injections up in his eyebrows. And I'm going to ruin Sylvester Stallone movies for you. You'll notice he can't even move them now. It just doesn't happen. And now you're going to be totally conscious of that. You can send your emails and thank me later. But the terrible costumes. You know, this one was white, and it looked like a Mugatu outfit on Star Trek.
Yes,
you know,
I seem to remember that.
Yeah, you know, and it's just, you know, I mean, you know, if it was far off, it's okay. Mm-hmm. But when you get up close, you go, oh, look, a shitty werewolf mask. Then, as we talked about, there was kind of a decent transformation scene, which is, we discussed last week, the money shot of all werewolf films is the transformation. And it was very cleverly done in a low-budget way. You know, just quick cuts and, you know.
Late phases?
Late phases, yeah, so that was pretty good. We do have another question, however. And again, thank you, Keith, for recommending those films. They were quite enjoyable. This question comes to us from Sam in Calgary.
Sad.
As a horror fan, I must say that I despise exorcism movies. I never liked The Exorcist or any of the rip-off exorcism movies that followed. They're all the same. They claim to be based on true stories, which is bullshit when you do some digging. They all involve women being possessed, of course, because women are all evil or something, or being penetrated by the devil should only happen to women. Who knows? Every exorcism movie seems to lack any plot and just involves the possessed puking, contorting, swearing, and just being disgusting and overly annoying in general. All shock horror. It's just as bullshit as jump scares, if you ask me. If I want to watch disgusting, shocking garbage, I will just find some messed up Japanese porn on the internet. I'm not fully Japanese. I am half Irish. Are there any watchable exorcism movies out there, kids?
It's interesting that he talks about women, though. I immediately snapped to mind of the reincarnation of Peter Proud.
And wasn't The Exorcist actually based on a boy?
William Peter Blatty's novel, yes, was actually based on the possession and exorcism by the Catholic Church of a young boy. For my money, I thought The Exorcist was great.
The original one I enjoyed. You know, mostly that it creeped everybody else out around me and not me. That was really enjoyable for me. But the book was spectacular. I enjoyed it. I read another book recently, but the name escapes me, and it is based on a man who was possessed. I'll have to look up the name. I don't remember the name of it, but it was interestingly done.
Well, I mean, they always said that there was something in The Exorcist to scare anybody, whether it be dogs, because at the beginning and during that scene you have those menacing dogs, and especially menacing dogs.
Yeah.
It's just a short clip
where
father is in the desert.
Oh yeah.
And there's those dogs.
Northern Iraq. Yeah. Okay. Prologue.
So you know, there's something for everybody there, and especially when they did that unrated version where you get to see her doing the spider walk and all of that.
I enjoyed that.
And then you got to see like the apparitions on the wall and.
Yeah, it didn't frighten me. The movie, there was nothing in it that kept me up at night. There was nothing that frightened me about it, but it was just.
It's disturbing.
Disturbing, you know, especially her coming down the stairs like that. That was just.
Well, having said that, you know, I mean, I remember going to see Richard Burton and in Exorcist II, The Heretic.
I don't think I've ever actually seen it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's horrible. Oh, fuck. It was bad. Oh, I mean, it bore so little resemblance to the movie that preceded it. It was just awful.
So it's a good thing you missed it?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then Exorcist 3, there's only one cool scene, and it's in a kind of like a hospital hallway. And you see this woman walk down a hallway, turn left, and out of nowhere comes this person with these garden shears doing this, a really fast walk behind her, and it kind of freaks you out, right? There's that. So there's two movies there that, you know, and then they made the recent remakes. Two versions of the same script.
No, there's a prequel.
Yeah, but they filmed it twice because they didn't like the way the one director approached it. So they went and reshot the whole thing again, and neither were good. Maybe you get to The Exorcism of Emily Rose and things like that. If I was to recommend anything, The Devil Inside.
That was a good one.
It's not a bad exorcism film.
I enjoyed that one.
But yeah, Sam's absolutely right. Because after a while, it's just the same thing.
By rote. There's nothing different in them.
Beg to differ on that point. With The Exorcist, the Peter Blatty picture, and directed by Billy Friedkin, who is a non-horror director, you know, it was made more with an effective use of sound, effective use of sound levels, an effective use of creating. We're talking about an everyday look. You had a look of everyday people. These were not pretty actors that were in there. Alan Burstyn was Jack McGowan. Look at that craggy face, of Jason, David Carras. With the use of religion and religious iconography in that picture, I think it struck a common chord with the audience. That was what drove the fear. You had a little girl, basically an innocent little girl, going into these possessions. But then you have people, perhaps watching it, battling their own faith, understanding the power of a religion, and then you saw this conquering going on. And the great tribute to the picture is that it made the unbelievable believable for people.
True.
The way it was effective.
Okay.
That's how I see it. It's still a stunner. The stunner is when he shoots over. I don't want to. The ending, for those of you who haven't seen it, when he's on the ground and he's holding the hands,
right,
and he says, do you have your confession? And it's, it's like you're not seeing in a cruder film. You would have seen his face, and what his body would have looked like.
I think that reality in it was something I just haven't seen in any other film.
Yeah.
Since then, and you're right. A lot of the sequels and stuff that's come out is just, it's crap.
Yeah, and this beautiful ending with Lee J. Cobb, of all people, as Kinderman, saying in the uncut version of, "I get passes to movies. Do you want to go to a movie?" And here you are sitting in a movie, watching this, and you're going, "Okay, yeah, this is real people." That was just my take on it. The sequels, they were different. There were different looks on things. The prequel, no, it was there. Interesting ways to do things.
Wasn't The Omen about possession as well?
No. The Omen was about
the birth of the devil.
Oh,
the birth of the devil. In the same way as you might say Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
It's only been about 1,000 years since I've seen it.
But Rosemary's Baby was different, though. That was a film of its time.
Yes.
You're dealing with
indeed
thalidomide crisis at the time, and again, you had Mia Farrow, a '60s child, if you will, the rebel child with the short hair. Then.
That's right.
She cut her hair off, and it was interesting. Sinatra didn't want her to do the role. She was married to him, and he phoned up. It was William Castle that actually had that picture. He was going to make that, and he forever, to his grave, he got screwed out of it because 20th Century Fox and a few other people said, "No, you don't get to do this." And Sinatra got on the phone and said, "You basically get her out of that film."
Makes you wonder how much of a different film it would have been had it gone a different way.
Yeah, it was a major studio film.
Yeah,
because that was Polanski, wasn't it?
I think
so. It was Polanski that did that. But it was William Castle who's on the credits, the opening credits. William Castle film, but he was the one that was going to do there's like 13 Ghosts and all this other stuff, and the Tingler.
The Tingler.
The Tingler.
What did he do? He tingled.
Yes. Yeah. Scream for your life. But you get a guy doing the Tingler, and then he gets to that because he always thought that was his magnum opus. That was what the old Ed Wood line, of this is what I'm going to be remembered for.
Rondo Hatton is the creeper. What did he do? He crept.
Don't get me on Rondo.
I love Rondo.
Don't get me on Rondo Hatton.
No, I love Rondo Hatton.
It's very sad story.
Yeah, it is. But, it's just, it's just a silly thing like the beast with 5 fingers.
I think, that's a title. Rondo Hatton, though, for those of you who don't know, there's the Rondo Hatton Awards and everything, but he was in a film called The Brute Man, which is the absolute ending of the Universal Horror saga at the time. And to me, it was an exploitation of a person's deformity. And because he was, unfortunately, society had given him this look. This look had happened through circumstances. Actually, it was exposure to gas in trenches. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, I took us off on a tangent.
I'm sorry. No, I just
no,
get onto things.
Well, that's no. It's
It's not.
And
It's
I'm
not
glad
this
that they have a
delicious.
Rondo Award. Actually,
Yeah, it's not. We were talking about werewolves and we're having moonshine.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for this evening. Join us again next time. I believe we are going to be covering film DVD collecting, VHS collecting, and we may have a very special guest on a Zoom interview. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Thank you to Terry Sherwood. Thank you to Melanie McCurdie. Look out for her new book, The Lunatic Posse, coming out this year. Buy all her works. Really good gore writing.
Read them.
Read them.
Don't just
yeah.
buy them.
Try to do it without your lips
Yeah.
moving. Of course you will.
Yeah.
It's like don't just buy the meds. Take it. You have to take them.
We'll see you next time. It's so much fun being around people drinking moonshine. Ciao for now.
Bye.
Let that go away. Knock 3
Things in the
times.
walls.
Really? You want us to start off with that? On the ceiling, if you want me.
What's on the pipe? The answer is no. Where did they find Tony Orlando? At the crack of dawn.
Yes. This is all lined on.
All right.
And what you missed when you were on a break.